Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Palmer's free virtual event, Backyard to Big Sky, your guide to birding Southern Colorado's diverse ecosystems. We'll give everyone just a minute or two to hop in here. So, in the meantime, Andrew, let's get birdie. What kind of birds have you been seeing?
Ooh, lately, some of the highlights for me that I've seen, I really enjoyed seeing some Williamson sapsuckers this morning, which is a bird that I hadn't spent a lot of time with before moving to Colorado. It's definitely one of our special birds. Um, and I also have enjoyed seeing the broad-tailed hummingbirds zipping around and flashing their, iridescent throats and basically just being nuisances to each other, dive bombing and displaying and all of that. Yeah. What about you?
Oh, wonderful. I was thinking about the American Dipper that I got to see in Salida in March, actually a couple times on the river. It's one of the only aquatic songbirds in North America. So it does this little dip and then jumps right into the river and dives and then comes back out to do it again. So they're really, really fun to watch and they're total cuties.
Awesome.
Well, let's hop right in. We've got a lot of great info for you. My name's Jolene Collins. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Palmer Land Conservancy, and I'm based down in our Pueblo office. And today we've got Dr. Andrew Dreelan with us. He's the Land Stewardship Manager for Palmer Land Conservancy. He's been obsessed with birds for the past 14 years, and he studied ornithology at Cornell University and has been involved in bird research across the United States and Latin America. He's got lots of great bird wisdom to share with us. But before we get into that, we want to start with learning about your spark bird. So we're going to talk about our spark bird. First of all, what is a spark bird? Next slide, please. This is my spark bird. So a spark bird is that bird that ignites your interest in bird watching. Usually it comes with an aha moment or a story that goes along with it. This is the belted kingfisher that I saw sitting on a line over the Arkansas River in Pueblo, and they're just gorgeous birds. I love that they fish. I love that they have this little mohawk, and also that the females have the color, that rust colored belt across them. So they have more flair than the boys, which is a little unusual and kind of the opposite to what you normally see in birds. But we want to learn about your spark bird. So we're going to give you an opportunity to submit your story about your spark bird, and you can fill that story in, and we'll collect those and do a little follow up in our email. Give us just a sec to get that going. Okay, great. So if you wouldn't mind telling us the story of your spark bird, we'll leave that up. And in the meantime, Andrew, I want to know what's your spark bird?
Yeah, so the I'm originally from Georgia and I grew up, hunting and fishing with my mom and um weird. So I, had seen some birds before, but nothing had quite set it off. I definitely loved dinosaurs and all the cool critters. But it wasn't until I was in high school and we had this really cool teacher at our school who taught an ecology class. And that first day that I walked into his class, there was a copy of the Peterson's Field Guide to the Birds of North America on every single person's desk. And I remember opening that field guide and just being blown away by the sheer diversity of birds that were detailed in this book and all with gorgeous paintings. And I had thought that there were only like 20 kinds of birds before, and then I was like, you're telling me that there's over 750 different kinds just in the US alone? I gotta go see these birds. And so it was just this whole awakening, and then of course learning that, birds are dinosaurs, it came full circle, and that really kicked off my desire to become a conservation biologist, to work with birds, and to help protect bird populations. And so I pursued that in school. I did my graduate research on prairie birds and their ecology. And that's ultimately what brought me to Colorado because Colorado is just an incredible state for birds and with all of its varied ecosystems. So that's how I wound up here.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. And thanks for you all that submitted your Spark bird stories. Can't wait to collect those and send those out to you all. So, Andrew, I know that your Spark bird stories from Georgia, but in getting to know you, I know it's the birds that brought you to Colorado. So, what makes Colorado special when it comes to birds?
Yeah, it's almost hard to know where to start. There's a lot of great things that make it special. So, our state has a lot of different ecosystems in it. So we have shortgrass prairie, we have uh, cottonwood forests, we have basically gigantic mountains with spruce, pines. We've got rivers, lakes, and then going on to the western side of the state, we have rocky deserts. So, each of these ecosystems has its own unique set of bird species that you're not necessarily going to find in the other ecosystems. So overall, that boosts the diversity of the birds in the state way, way up. So there's over 500 species of birds that have been found in the state. When you add that to the fact that there's a migration pathway right along the Front Range, along the eastern edge of the Rocky Mountains, where tons of bird species migrating up from all the way from South America up to the Arctic pass through. Once again, that just is a migration highway that is makes for spectacular bird viewing. And then, here in southern Colorado, where, our focus area is with Palmer, this part of the Great Plains or the Great Plains broadly are called the American Serengeti because it's so renowned for the abundance and diversity of wildlife that was on it initially when people uh, settlers came to see the area. It was just remarkable. And although there's not as much wildlife as before, it's still remarkably abundant and diverse. And so it's just an incredible area for the convergence of the habitats, the migration routes, the diversity of species, and the sheer abundance, because we are still lucky enough to have a lot of intact habitat that hasn't been developed yet. So yeah, that's my, I'll put a bow on it there. There's tons of stuff that makes Colorado's bird life special and unique. So, yeah, basically, our goal today is to not give a comprehensive ornithological survey of the state's bird life because they said I wasn't allowed to give an 8 hour long seminar. But our goal today is to highlight some of the special species that occupy some of Colorado's unique ecosystems that are here in our service region. And maybe you've heard about them before, and maybe you'll learn some new facts about them, or maybe you haven't heard about them, and it might inspire you to get out and see them and to visit some of the locations where they're found. So we want to highlight some of these bird species and then maybe equip you with some tools to go out and encounter them and learn more about what they have going on. So, without further ado, we'll dive into the species that we're going to see. So, we're going to talk through three ecosystems. We're going to talk through the prairie, we're going to talk through the Front Range and the foothills, and then we're going to go through the Rocky Mountains. And so, we're going to go up in elevation on a journey together. And we're going to start out on the prairie. And the first species that we're going to talk about today is the lark bunting. And this is a species that I didn't know too much about before I started working out west, but it's a tremendously cool species that really stole my heart. So they are Colorado state bird, but you'll only find them kind of in the eastern plains, in the eastern third of the state. And a lot of ranchers know these as rainbirds. So lark buntings, growing up in a very dry environment, they travel in flocks to track areas where rains have fallen and to breed in those really productive areas. And they have this incredible parachuting display where they float down almost kind of like moths slowly while vocalizing. They absolutely stole my heart when I saw them for the first time. And so if you are taking a trip through the eastern part of the state, they're a great one to encounter. Next slide, please. Next up, another one that you're really only going to find out on the prairie the burrowing owl. So here in this picture, we have four young burrowing owls that have recently, they're probably a month or two old that have come out of a burrow. It's a very, very apt name. So you're almost always going to see these burrowing owls in and around prairie dog towns because the prairie dogs dig burrows and create free real estate for the burrowing owls to occupy. Now, burrowing owls are also really unique because you mostly see them during the day. That's when they're active. So they are kind of breaking the owl mold a bit there. You can also see them floating in the air, hovering to hunt before they dive down and go eat insects and small mammals and vertebrates. And the last thing that I'll say about them is that it has been discovered that burrowing owls actually eavesdrop on prairie dog alarm calls and use that as a free home defense system. So if you want to see burrowing owls, you got to go to prairie dog towns, at least around here. So yeah, on to our next prairie species. So, ironically, this species called the mountain plover might be better named mountains in the background plover because you find it out on the prairie rather than up in the mountains for the most part. But the mountain plover is tr one of Colorado's most special birds. So there's only about 20,000 of these birds left in the entire world. You could fit the entire world population in the Broncos Stadium comfortably. About 10,000 of that 20,000 breeds in Colorado. So as a state, we're responsible for stewarding half of the world population of this really unique species that's only found on the Great Plains. Now, you can see maybe here from the photo that they've got this kind of dusty brown color on their back and this bold white color on their front. And so this leads into another name that they're sometimes called the prairie ghost. They will display to each other with these bold white chests and raise their wings up and make lots of flight displays with each other. But then when a predator comes along, they will turn their back to them and almost disappear. The other really cool thing about mountain plovers, again, they really like heavily grazed areas, so they can be compatible with uh, ranching operations, but also they predominantly breed on prairie dog towns, and that's their preferred habitat. The other unique thing about mountain plovers is that they will raise nests separately. So the female will lay a nest with eggs that the male will take care of, and then she'll go raise her own nest. And so they're literally putting their eggs in two different baskets to make a living in this really harsh prairie environment with lots of predators because they're just nesting in a little scrape on the ground. So again, they're one of our most special birds, and we'll give you some tips on how to encounter these really cool birds later on. So yeah, I think that covers our prairie birds. So we'll move on to our next habitat, the Front Range, where prairie and mountains meet. Incidentally, this really productive area with hills and rocks and forest is also the area where most of Colorado's population lives. And so it's also where we have more urban and suburban environments and a lot of species that kind of occupy those areas as generalists. So we'll talk about some of the familiar species that you might see, but also you can see some of these prairie species out on the prairie or up in the mountains or both because they're kind of broad spectrum species. But you can also encounter them in your backyards. So on to the next slide, please. All right. The first species is Steller's jay. They are stellar birds, but they are actually named for a Russian ornithologist who initially described them to Western science. But these birds are essentially the Western counterpart to the Eastern blue jay. They're more black, whereas the blue jay is white, but they're both blue. And Steller's jays are like jays. They are very smart, social, inquisitive. They form very deep pair bonds between males and females, and they're very social. And you can see this one in the picture has its crest raised a little bit. And they use their crests in social displays. When they're relaxed, they have their crest down. But if they're alert or aggressive, they'll raise their crest up and make a ruckus with each other. So yeah, and then you can often find them in backyards. and they'll often mimic hawks, potentially to scare away other predators or other species that might be competing with them at a feeder. So, yeah, speaking of feeder birds, this next one you can also see at a feeder. Next slide, please. This is the Bullock's oriole. So the Bullock's oriole is a really cool species. I'm biased because orange is my favorite color, but they're tremendous. You often find them nesting in cottonwood trees where they'll make these pendulum-like hanging nests that almost even blow in the wind. And they're a pretty easy nest to find, and so you can really enjoy seeing them go in and out of nests. And as this photo would indicate, you can also attract Bullock's Orioles to your yards using jelly or orange slices, and because they will eat fruit and get that sugar rush, that we all know and love, and that helps fuel their busy lives. And they really need that fuel because this species spends the winter in West Mexico and then migrates up to the American West. And so, especially as they're migrating, they really, really need that energy. So they're a familiar species across, the foothills here in Colorado. And then on to the next species, please. All right. So next we have the white-throated swift. This is a really awesome species that, um, so if you're not familiar with swifts, they're like swallows where they are flying almost all day, kind of like little jet planes, doing all kinds of acrobatic maneuvers throughout the sky. And that's because they're eating float insects. They're flying and floating up in the sky and just chowing down on them all day. And the white-throated swift is one of our unique species to the American West. And they will also nest in rocky ledges. And so they're up in these rocky crevices and some good places to see them. We'll talk more later, but you can find them at Garden of the Gods and at Red Rock's open space, nesting in those rock walls. And so sometimes there's closures for climbers to make way for the swift nesting so that they aren't disturbed in their nesting areas. But even if there's no rocks around nearby, they will range far and wide across the Front Range, flying on their daily commutes to catch lots of insects. And you often detect them first by hearing their buzzy bzz, 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 call from way up in the air above you.
Not to
So,
mention,
yeah,
these are some of the cutest, if I might say so myself.
please.
It looks like a bunch of you have dropped in since Andrew got started. I just want to make a little reminder here that we will send out a link to the recording. So nothing has been missed so far. And if you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A. We'll do questions at the end, but submit those anytime. Back to you, Andrew.
Perfect. Thanks, Jolene. Yeah, so that's the white-throated swift, and that will cover us for now on our front range birds. We're going to move up into the Rocky Mountains, which are really just these incredible bastions of wilderness where there's lots of interconnected protected land. We'll talk more about our efforts involved in that land protection later, but we'll get into the species that inhabit these high altitude coniferous forests. So, yeah, on to the first species. We've got a bird called the Clark's nutcracker. So the Clark's nutcracker, I was really happy that I saw one of these birds actually this morning while I was doing a property visit. It was making its loud, raucous call. These birds are kind of forest guardians in a lot of ways, and forest gardeners because they love to eat pine seeds, particularly white bark pine, but many other pine seeds as well. And so what they'll go into the pine cone, take the seeds out, but they'll also stash those seeds underground so that they can come back and feed on them at a later date. So they're very smart, they have very good spatial memories, but of course, they don't get every single seed, and that's how they replant forests. And so they will travel far and wide, often seeding the pines in new areas. And so, in a way, they're gardening our western forests. and they're just a tremendously cool, kind of raucously loud, crow-sized bird. Um, and then they have these glossy black wings, and when they fan them out, you can see these big, bold white patches. Um, so yeah, they're very, very cool. And yeah, they'll basically breed any time of year whenever the pine trees are making lots of seeds. So they're also very winter hardy. Yeah, on to our next species. This is also a very winter hardy bird. You can see it out on the plains as well because they do have kind of broad areas of territory that they cover. They move around a lot. This is the magical, mythical golden eagle, which is quite a hard bird to spot a lot of the time. But if you are lucky, you can really encounter them. They are very long-lived. They're very agile flyers, and they like to nest um, out on the plains. They'll sometimes nest in cottonwood trees or on the ground, but up in the mountains, they have these kind of fortresses that, the term is eyries. They'll nest in these cliff faces where nobody can access it. And so they're very safe and protected, and they need that because their nesting cycle can last up to 100 days, all the way from egg laying to when the chicks fledge. And yeah, they're just incredible predators who eat a wide diversity of prey, all the way from prairie dogs to grouse to squirrels, jackrabbits, rabbits, ground squirrels, all kinds of stuff. The one in this picture is carrying a prairie dog. And yeah, so they are just tremendous predators that really exert a lot of important forces on the ecosystem. So yeah, we'll move on to our next species now. This one is um, less so a big predator and more a small brown cutie. So this is the brown-capped rosy finch. And if you were ever going to change Colorado's state bird, this would be a really strong contender because the brown-capped rosy finch is found almost exclusively in Colorado and nowhere else in the world. There's a few that go into New Mexico, but almost the entire world population is found right here in Colorado. And these little birds are high altitude specialists who right now are making their nests on top of Pikes Peak, in the granite and gravel slopes. And then during the winter, they'll fly down and descend in altitude where they will, visit feeders around Woodland Park. And they have these, beautiful little hints of kind of strawberry or raspberry coloring in their wings. And yeah, they're like a goldfinch, basically, but our unique and special one. So, understandably, with the lack of snow on Pikes Peak and snow being water that then attracts other life and insects, and the recent declines in snowpack, the species is threatened by climate change because they really rely on that snowpack. Um, so yeah, that kind of is our quick overview of some of the specialty birds across our three main ecosystems here in southern Colorado.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andrew. So we want to give a chance to hear from our audience, and we're interested in what Colorado birds do you most want to see? So you should see the poll popping up on your screen, and you can tell us, are you looking for prairie birds or foothill birds, mountain birds, or maybe all of the above? We'll give you just a moment here to submit your answers, and we'll see what you all think.
I'm definitely in all of the above camp. Where are you at, Jolene? Who's got your vote?
I think the prairie birds are really cute. So I think for the cuteness scale, I'm gonna stick with the prairie birds. But I
All
mean,
right.
honestly, I call myself a baby birder. I always want to learn and see more. So I'll take any of them.
Learning and seeing more is just the most fun part of it to me.
All right, so let's wrap up our poll. All right, looks like everyone's with us, all of the above. I think you kind of set the scene for us there. So we got people that love birds no matter what. That's wonderful. Thanks y'all for jumping in.
Great.
So we want to see all these birds, Andrew, but how do we find them? Can you help us out?
Sure, yeah. I think so. And yeah, there's lots of great options. So there's it's hard to go astray. I'll just say also for the record that the bird on that slide there was an American three-toed woodpecker. It's another one of our unique mountain species. So fortunately, there's lots of great tools these days for in the modern era with smartphones and digital technology to connect with local birds like never before. And the first tool that I'm going to start with is basically a bird ID wizard. It's called Merlin Bird ID from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And you can see the home page here. It's got a fun bird of the day feature here. And on the day I took this photo, it was the blue-gray gnatcatcher. And Merlin is your expert, bird ID friend in your pocket. You can do tons of cool things with it. So we're going to highlight each of those features one by one. So next slide, please. Um, Also, of course, the disclaimer, Merlin is both free and you can find it on it works for iOS and Android, so you're covered no matter what phone you have. But either way, it's a free field guide in your pocket. So depending on where you live, you basically download the bird pack for your area, which contains a download of all the species that you can reasonably expect to see in the area. And so here I've got the US Rocky Mountains bird pack, which includes over 350 bird species, which is just a phenomenal amount of diversity. So you can see here that you can scroll through the different species. You can check out the different families and the different groups. And then if you click on one of those species and open it up, you get something like the image on the right. This one is highlighting a really cool grouse species called the white-tailed ptarmigan. You can see what habitats it lives in. You can scroll through photos so you can see the range of variation and how kind of the different ways that the species can look like. And then you can read some text about it that describes what it looks like, where it can usually be found. And you can also listen to recordings of the vocalizations, which is really, really helpful for just having that resource on hand and kind of comparing what you might be hearing in the field. Um, Next slide. Now getting into the really advanced tools that Merlin lets you do. Just one of the incredible things is that Merlin can actually help you identify birds from the photos that you take. So you start by taking a photo, you upload it into Merlin just off your camera roll on your phone, and then you do a little zoom until your bird fills the box, like in the picture on the left here. And I was testing this with a picture of a red-breasted nuthatch, and unsurprisingly, Merlin nailed that it was a red-breasted nuthatch, and so it just gave me the option for this is my bird, and it pulled up the fact sheet about that species. And then you might also notice here on this second slide that just under the results tab, it says Colorado Springs, Colorado, March 10th. And so I gave Merlin my general location and the date, which also helps Merlin dial in on making the correct suggestion for what species that you were finding. The other species that, or sorry, the other note that I'll say here is that it doesn't actually have to be all that great of a photo. Merlin is really impressive at identifying birds from bad photos too, which is really, really crucial. Sometimes, the birds just don't cooperate. They won't sit still for you. It might just be a blur of color, or there might be tons of branches in the way. Merlin can still really give you some helpful suggestions that even if it's going to give you suggestions that will, even if it doesn't get it perfectly right, will really help you get to the final answer. So then, arguably, the most impressive feature of the Merlin is what we'll cover on the next slide here. So Merlin is like Shazam for birds. This is always the feature that I start with if I'm just chatting with a stranger, because it really takes this part of the environment that we are encountering on a daily basis with birdsong, and it really translates that into something that we can decipher and tell us actually who's singing. So if you are in your backyard or at a park, in a forest, you can run Merlin and just hold down the record button, and let the bird song filter in, and Merlin will sort through that song highlighting who's singing when and all of the different species that it hears at a really given time. This is also especially a useful tool if you are hard of hearing. Merlin can, point out who's actually vocalizing around you and give you some tips on who to look for. So it's a really incredible tool. Again, it's not 100% perfect, but it's going to give you suggestions that are going to get you in the ballpark. And you can either follow up on that, you can save the recording and upload it. And then, you can just have that on hand and again, do a little more detective work after Merlin's gotten you like 90% of the way there. So all in all, it's an incredible free tool that I highly recommend to anyone. And if there's any intrepid international travelers in the audience, Merlin works not just in the US, but across most of the world as well. So it's a really fantastic tool that makes birds accessible in a way that they never have been before. So I highly recommend checking it out. Yeah, and then on to the next slide, please. So the companion to Merlin is this really cool program called eBird. So I pointed out how Merlin taps into, the date, the location, and that sort of thing to know who's singing, and that it can identify songs and photos. eBird is the data set that Merlin was trained on to give it the power to make those predictions accurately. So eBird is the tool that birders use when they go out bird watching. They log their sightings using eBird. So every time I'm bird watching, I'm logging my sightings using eBird. And it's basically like Strava for birds. So you keep this incredible record of everything that you've seen. And it basically starts like this. So you download, again, free app for iOS and Android. And then when you want to go birding, you start with the leftmost slide. You pull up the app, you start your checklist. eBird will give you a list of the birds in your area, sorted by how common or how rare they are. You can record what you see, all the numbers, all the species. eBird will keep track of that for you. So, no more pen and paper. And then you can also use eBird to basically find birds near you. And eBird, every checklist you keep and submit will be recorded. eBird will generate lots of stats for, all the different species you've seen, where you've seen them, and you can even upload your photos and audio recordings that you might have that Merlin might have helped you with. So all in all, it's a really incredible tool for actually going out and finding those birds. So if you're interested in, figuring out where to go to see some of those species that we talked about, eBird is a really great companion tool with Merlin. So I'll highlight some more features there. Onto the next slide, please. So I talked about really the mobile app with eBird there. There's also lots of features that go into more detail on the eBird website. Again, free to access, and you can go on the website and really dive in at a level of detail that is very impressive. So here, if you want to find new spots to go birding or to just go recreate outdoors, this is the eBird hotspots page. And so you can see here that there's all of these little pins and they're in a rainbow of colors. Those colors are based on the number of bird species that have been seen at each point. So the warmer the colors, the more bird diversity. And so you can almost kind of see, we've got Colorado Springs here. You can see some more orange and red down there on the south side of the springs. That's how we know it's a hot spot of bird species of diversity going on down around Fountain. So if I wanted to go find the most bird species, that's where I would start to head. But if we were to click on one of these pins and learn about a specific location, we can do that and see some things in more detail. So here's one for Sinton Pond Open Space, which is a public open space in the Springs that's conserved through us. And eBird will give you immediately some great stats. It'll let you know how many species have been seen there. It will show you some pictures of the area so you can get a sense for what it looks like. They also just released this About feature on the left-hand side underneath Overview, where you can read a summary of the hotspot, which will often detail kind of hours that it's open, how to access it, where at the hotspot might have the best locations for seeing certain species. And then there's also this wonderful feature that highlights iconic birds. And by iconic, what it's really talking about is species that you can see in higher numbers relative to other areas. So some of the special or iconic birds at Sinton Pond are lazuli bunting, song sparrow, and Jolene's sparkbird, Belgian kingfisher. So if Jolene wants to reconnect with her sparkbird, I'm going to recommend that Jolene go check out Sinton Pond. So these are really great tools, again, that put a lot of information at your fingertips for how to go pick where you want to go birding. Now, if we want to find a specific species, maybe one that's harder than most to see, we can try our next feature. Next slide, please. So this is the species map tool. You can basically type in any bird species in the world, and it will pull up a map of the eBird sightings for that species. And so all the things that we're looking at a very zoomed in image right now of an area east of Colorado Springs, called Myers Road, pardon me, and it's near the Hanover Fire Station. And you can see all of these blue pins here are areas where people have submitted a given eBird checklist. And the red pins are also areas where people have submitted recent checklists, but they have recent sightings. So basically, recent checklists within the past month. And the species that I typed in here to potentially check out and go see is mountain plover. And so, eBird presented the map of all the different sightings, and then I zoomed into an area where there's lots of different reports that people have been making about mountain plover. So tons of birders in Colorado Springs have been hitting up this Myers Road spot to go find the mountain plovers. And you can see here on the left that you can see what dates they've been recorded. You can see in what numbers. So some folks even had three at one point. They uploaded some photos, and so you could click on that checklist and go check out their photos. And then the other thing too here is you can look at the satellite imagery along Myers Road. There's some brown prairie, and then there's some darker areas with these little light dots in between. That's a prairie dog town. Those little light dots are the prairie dog burrows. And so the birders found the prairie dog town, and then they found the mountain plovers associated with the prairie dog town. And so basically, this species map tool is a great way to kind of hone in on areas where people are reporting sightings of more uncommon or rare birds that you kind of have to put in that little bit of extra effort or knowledge to like figure out where I'm going to go look for that species. And again, you can do this with any bird species in the world. It's an incredible tool. So yeah, that really rounds out the tools from eBird and Merlin that we can use on the birder side of things. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, ultimately, the purpose of eBird is to actually make a difference for science and conservation. And so one of the really cool things that the scientists do at the Cornell Lab is take all those sightings of all those different bird species and run some very fancy statistical models and actually produce these incredible maps of where birds are found across the entire continent at a very precise, resolution and level of detail that we've never been able to access before. And so what we're looking at here is this map of the lark bunting's global range. The red is where it's found in the summer. The blue is where it's found in the winter. The yellow is where it's found during migration. And basically, the darker colors are where there's greater concentrations of the numbers of lark buntings. And so, this is an incredible tool for conservation groups like us here at Palmer to understand where to target specific areas where there's the most species abundance or diversity and use our conservation dollars to make the most impact to protect those species. So you can see, that the eastern plains of Colorado have some very, very dark red supporting big numbers of lark buntings. So that's, again, really important for us here in Colorado. So next slide, please. The other thing that we can do with those tools at eBird is to actually understand population trends, whether species are increasing in places or decreasing in places, which again is essential for conservation. Now, unfortunately, I do have bad news. There's lots of very steep declines of birds going on. So we've got here in the red, that's showing declines. Blue is showing increases. And unfortunately, this map is all red. So basically, over the past decade, from 2012 to 2022, eBird estimates that we've lost 55% of the world's lark bunting population. And so that number has, in just a decade, our number of lark buntings has been cut in half, which is just a remarkably fast decline. And unfortunately, it's a similar situation for many other bird species that call Colorado home. Next slide, please. Another grassland bird species, the loggerhead shrike. We've lost a quarter of our loggerhead shrikes in Colorado in the past decade. It's not just true for prairie species either, although they're often the most quickly declining. Next slide, please. This is true for a lot of our mountain species as well, that are facing really dire challenges. So one of our most special mountain species, again, the mountain bluebird, which just looks like this beautiful drop of sky distilled into bird form. We've lost a third of our mountain bluebirds in the past decade in Colorado. It's just been a tremendously rapid decline. And so these are, the really stark challenges of doing environmental conservation work and doing bird conservation work that keep me up at night, is these really steep declines that birds are facing and how we can avert those declines.
Yeah, so Andrew, can you talk a little bit more about then the work of Palmer is doing to help prevent some of these declines that you've shown us today?
Yeah, absolutely, I can. And that's the part that, lifts me up and the part that I get, jazzed about is trying to make a difference to help keep these incredible birds here on our landscape. So yeah, I would be happy to talk about that. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the number one driver of bird population declines here and in the US broadly, far and away, is habitat loss. When habitat is destroyed and developed. If forest is cut down, or prairie is plowed, whether that's to become subdivisions or parking lots or row crop agriculture, these habitats aren't suitable for nearly as many bird species. And so most of our Western birds really require large, intact areas of high quality habitat. We talked about how a lot of these species migrate or have really big home ranges that they require large areas to have enough food to eat, have enough places to shelter. And so our work at Palmer really involves protecting habitat and connecting that habitat at a big landscape scale, all the way from the mountains to the prairie. And so when I talk about land protection, what I really mean, for the most part, what we do, we work with landowners to enroll properties in legal protection in a voluntary process that pays the landowner for not developing the property while while making sure that from a legal perspective, it is conserved permanently forever in an undeveloped, relatively natural state. And then my job is to go out and monitor all of those properties that we conserve annually and to check up on them, make sure that the landowner is continuing to steward it well, and safeguard that habitat for birds and lots of other critters and plants and all the great things that keep Colorado, Colorado. So one of the things I wanted to highlight here on this inset This is a really cool conservation easement that our team worked on. Avenger Open Space in Woodland Park. So the area surrounding in gray is part of Pike National Forest, and there was this kind of in-holding area that was private, but not legally protected. And the city of Woodland Park connected with us, and we were able to put a conservation easement on that property. And now that entire block of habitat is protected, and we know it's not going to be developed, not in a year, not in 5 years, not in 10 years, not ever. It's going to remain public open space that people can enjoy and that is habitat that's permanently protected for birds and other wildlife. And some of the species that I highlighted, like Steller's jay, Clark's nutcracker, and brown-capped rosy finch, all use this area. And so it really just provides me with a huge sense of relief to know that we're doing the work to protect these places for these special birds. So that's really one key example that I would like to highlight there. Um, Now, in a big picture standpoint, so Palmer conserves around 150 different properties for around 150,000 acres. Now, 150,000 is a big number, but acres can be this kind of amorphous measurement. So I'm going to use something that we as Americans are pretty good at thinking in football fields. So if we take that 150,000 acres, it's about 115,000 football fields. So that's a lot of games on a lot of area. And if we were to take all of that, those 115,000 football fields and smush them all together, Palmer's conserved land portfolio would be around the size of Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. We basically protect a national park sized area. It's just distributed across southern Colorado. My other favorite thing about the land that we protect is, and you can see it here on this map. So I'll kind of digest this map a little bit for us here. So we've got Colorado Springs towards the northern part of the map, and in the olive green, we've got public Palmer conserved properties, whereas in kind of the dark green, we have private Palmer conserved properties. And so my favorite thing, besides just the amount of habitat that's conserved, is the diversity and how it's this holistic profile going all the way again from the plains up through the foothills into the mountains, again, kind of covering that whole suite of southern Colorado's different ecosystems. We're contributing to protecting not just the mountain birds, not just the prairie birds, but the whole suite of what makes our bird life special in southern Colorado. So it really makes me happy as land stewardship manager that I get the honor of visiting these properties on an annual basis and checking up on them and working with the landowners and just making sure that that property continues to be stewarding in good hands, whether that's a protected open space, whether that is a farm, whether it's a ranch, or just, a lovely property in the forest. So I'm really thrilled to do that for my job. So yeah, that really is kind of the big picture on our land conservation portfolio and what we're doing for all the birds that we talked about.
This is a great opportunity to see from our audience tuning in what Palmer Conserve properties have you visited? So you're going to see another one of those polls pop up on your screen. And we've got a list of Palmer Conserve properties: Bluestem Prairie Open Space, Red Rocks Open Space, Jones Park Open Space, others, or maybe you haven't been to any yet. So go ahead and drop in your answer. We'd love to learn a little bit more about where you all are playing outside and if you're enjoying the conserved properties of Palmer. We'll give you just a second while people are dropping in their answers. Andrew, do you have a favorite from this list?
Out of our public open space properties, I'm biased towards the prairie because that's where I did my graduate research, and I love being out on the prairie, looking at prairie birds and prairie flowers, and just like the wide open habitats. So Bluestem Prairie Open Space is probably my favorite. If you have a sharp eye on that eBird map, it's one of the dark orange properties. So it has a very high species diversity because of the reservoir that it surrounds. And so it's also a great place to look at migrating shorebirds and waterfowl. And there's also a nice prairie dog town there. So yeah, that one's probably my favorite.
Let's see. Okay, great. So a nice little mix here. Looks like a lot of folks have been to Red Rocks Open Space, which makes sense. That's a really popular one. A little bit from Blue Stem and Jones. So we highly encourage you to get outside and enjoy the spaces that we work on conserving at Palmer. And I think Andrew did a really great job showing how land conservation is habitat conservation. So that's one of the ways that we're working to contribute to the health of our ecosystem, including our birds and where they live. And another way that we do this at Palmer is through community engagement. Next slide, please. A really good example of this is the work that we're doing down in Pueblo with Generation Wild. Generation Wild is a coalition of over 20 organizations that have come together with a mission to get kids outside. So for us in Palmer, our programming focuses on birds and bikes. So on the bird side of the things, this photo is of Andrew on the Arkansas River with a bunch of kids, and we did a bird walk with youth from the Boys and Girls Club back in March. And I think what's really important is like we know we have to start our community young. If they love these landscapes, then they'll want to protect them. And it's such a delight to get outside with kids here. And we partner with our local Audubon chapter, the Arkansas Valley Audubon Society. So it's really multiple groups that pull their resources to help kids have these experiences. And it's really touching to see them when they have their little aha moments or notice things. And often they'll also notice other things besides birds. They'll start looking at little critters or something about the water. So just watching their brains and creativity open in that way is really special. Next slide, please. We do a lot of bird walks, and I can think of so many reasons why they are a special experience, but I'd love to hear from you all. So, our last question is going to be, what's your favorite part about being on a bird walk? So, we'll give you an opportunity to tell us what's important to you. And I think that this also helps us understand what people are looking for in these experiences so that we can continue to make our outdoor experiences with our communities and with our donors really, really great. Andrew, what's your favorite part?
I enjoy, I'd say, connecting with something beyond myself, and sometimes it can just be so meditative. I will be birding for 3 hours and then I'll kind of stop and then I'll just be like, wait, what was I just doing for the past like time, time goes into a different kind of flow state. Um, and then I'd be lying if I said I didn't love getting my next lifer. And that new species that I haven't connected with yet. There's definitely some in Colorado that I still need to see. So I'm really happy, or I'm really looking forward to going out and searching for them, and just going on those adventures. What about you?
I grew up on the water, the West Coast surfing, and it's like, there's never a bad day surfing. There's never a bad day birding. There's always something to see. And just being outside, like moving your body in nature, being able to feel the sun or the wind or the rain on your skin, kind of depending on the weather, is just always a good day. And then you will be blessed with those moments of seeing something really special or seeing something new or learning something fun that kind of lights up your brain too. But I just find it to be just really, really soulful and healing. All right, we're gonna see what matters to you all. This is so great to see. So a lot of folks want to be in nature, see birds, learn about birds, and I love that there's a good amount of folks here that talked about the tranquility of the experience. That definitely resonates with me. Thank you all for jumping in there. Next slide, please. Before we dig into your questions, I just want to take a moment and say thank you, first of all, for joining us today. This event is free because we believe everyone should have the opportunity to enjoy nature and also have that opportunity to find their spark bird. So at Palmer, we do that through both land conservation and community engagement. And both of those are really long-term investments that need the support of donors like you. Andrew showed us how eBird works. So every single observation that you log, no matter how small that is, contributes to this massive data set that then scientists can use. And conservation works the same way. Palmer Land Conservancy, like Andrew said, has conserved nearly 150,000 acres of habitat across southern Colorado, but we certainly did not do that alone. So even a $10 contribution might feel small on its own, but 10 of those puts a pair of binoculars in a kid's hands. So there's a QR code on your screen. Remember, every gift, no matter the size, makes a difference. And so all of us contributing can help protect these spaces and give our community and the little ones an opportunity to go outside and enjoy it, not just today, but for generations to come. All right, now we get to dig into some of your questions. We have a few minutes here, so why don't we start? Um, Barry Cooper, more of a comment than a question, but I think that this is important to talk about. So he says, use caution when using Merlin ID for birds based solely on the sound recording. Some bird species have very similar calls, and Merlin can get confused, and it will often ID birds that aren't native to the area. So you need some background to know whether the bird should actually be in the area. So Andrew, can you talk a little bit about like it's not perfect, right? It works well. What's the approach here?
Yeah, that's a great point, Barry. Thanks for raising it. Yeah, essentially, Merlin's giving you its best guess. And so, the really helpful thing, I think, if, for folks who haven't might not have as much experience listening to birdsong is that Merlin is really helpful for getting you in the ballpark. So for instance, some of the species that it might get confused by, or sometimes it might, I can think of a recent example. So in the west, we have the lazuli bunting, and in the east, we have the indigo bunting. But here in Colorado, where east meets west, we sometimes get lazuli bunting. We can sometimes have some indigo buntings. Sometimes we've got a lot of lazuli buntings, and sometimes we've got some hybrids, and they're hearing each other's songs. And so there's just a little bit of a step back and a sanity check on Merlin's recommendations. It's going to get you, 80 to 90% of the way there, but it's always helpful to look at a field guide, look at range maps. Is the species that Merlin is recommending common to my area? Does it belong in the habitat that I'm in? Is it a mountain bird or a prairie bird? Or is eBird maybe telling me that this bird is rare? And so these are all just really helpful checks to go through. The really great thing, though, about Merlin is that you can save those recordings and then potentially upload them to eBird, where someone might give you feedback on that sighting. If it's a rare sighting, a reviewer might get in touch with you and say, "Hey, maybe you heard this more common species." Alternatively, there is always the one in a million. Hey, you actually did find something rare because, folks, rare birds do show up in some pretty crazy places. So, but
Well,
yeah, the
perfect.
great
Yeah,
thing is the digital documentation, right? And so that can always be a record, not just for Merlin, but for other human ears to listen to and validate.
perfect segue to Suzanne Marcolina, sorry if I'm not saying your name correctly, who asks, I believe I saw a violet green swift on the Red Rocks area. Is this possible?
Yeah, so there's the violet green swallow and the white-throated swift. They're both at Red Rocks. So you could reasonably expect to see either one there or both on the same trip. They're both going to nest in those rocks. Um, if it's basically the Swift is going to be that, basically black and white. And then the violet green swallows, yeah, they have incredible colors. They're very, fortunately, that's a protected area for them. And so, yeah, it's very reasonable to think that you could see a violet green swallow at Red Rocks. Congrats. They are so cool.
Awesome. We've got one. What has been the reaction of the Gen Wild kids to birding? Are they excited to start, or does their engagement create excitement? I'll take this one. I actually just heard a little anecdote to a bird walk that we went out on a couple of weeks ago with some elementary kids from the west side in Pueblo. And we heard that when they were going home on the bus after, they were super excited. And one of the kids had his phone out and he was recording the sounds on Merlin. And they said that he was taking those recordings and like showing them to his friends. So it's really cool to see them get excited and they're good bird spotters too. Like sometimes they're seeing things that like you're not even tuned into. So they're definitely excited. And I think it's just such a great way for them to experience nature. All right, everyone. Well, we are just at 1 o'clock right now, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. A huge thank you to Dr. Andrew Dreeland for joining us, for being part of our staff here at Palmer, for all the work that you do. Really appreciate everything that you shared, and thank you all for coming. You can continue to support our work, get involved, sign up for our e-news, hit that QR code. Any donation is important and does good work. Thanks for being here. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.
Thanks for coming, y'all. It was a pleasure.